Hello everyone, welcome to today's economics class conducted by Pratap Hegde for the Bcom 6th semester classes. Dear students, today we are going to start the second unit of your syllabus, that is location of industries. In this chapter we will try to analyze how and where and why an industrialist tries to locate his industry or establish his industry. What are the theories or what are the features that he is trying to find whenever he tries to establish an industry in a geographical location. There are different theories that tries to explain why and how an industrialist tries to establish an industry in a particular location. Today we are going to analyze the basic features or the conditions that are favorable for the location and the establishment of an industry. There are certain principles for the location of industry. There, some costs are spatially fixed. Some cost of production is based on the geographical area that are spatially variable. Like for example, location changes the cost of production. Like for example, land rent. Somewhere the land rent is very costly, and in certain areas the land rent is very cheap. So the land rent also plays an important role before locating an industry there. Then some costs are spatially fixed. Like for example, these costs are unaffected by the changes in the location. There is no difference in the cost of production for some commodity or certain costs irrespective of the locality or the region. Like for example, the national minimum standard of wages. Minimum wages is fixed for whatever region and whatever area of that country. So the wages has to be paid according to the national minimum wage standards. It cannot be differentiated. Next, the goal of the industrial location is to maximize profits by finding the least total cost location. Like for example, in some situations, sales or markets play a very important role. The location of market and the location of the industry plays the major role in the cost of production. Then the location decisions are based on spatially variable cost. Spatially means geographically. The meaning of spatial is called geographical. So the location decisions are based on spatially variable costs. The transportation costs are highly variable and therefore determine orientation. The main cost of production is also dependent upon the transportation cost, like the transportation of raw materials to the industry as well as the transportation of ready goods from industries to the market area. So therefore the transportation cost is also very much important in the location of industry. Then the characteristics of raw material is also very important. For example, there are two kinds of raw materials while seeing the location of the industry. First one is the raw material type that gains weight after the production, and the second type is the raw material that has weight before the production of commodity or before preparing the finished product, and the finished product is lighter than the raw material, and in the first case the finished product is heavier than the raw material. So there is difference between the kind of raw material also, and the kind of raw material also plays an important role while the location of industry. The next one is interdependence between factories increases with the complexity of industrial process. For example, agglomeration costs. Agglomeration means combining or making a cluster. Like for example, assembling certain commodities and making it a finished product. The interdependence of factories or industries depend upon the complexity or the nature of the commodity. Whenever the complexity of the product increases, there needs more industries for the agglomeration or making an assembly. So whenever the product is simpler, the interdependence of the industries will be reduced. So whenever there is a case of production of complex commodities, the assembly industries and other industries that produce important parts of that commodity has to be located nearby, so that the transportation cost in between those industries has to be reduced. So the agglomeration or the making the assembly also plays an important role while deciding the location of an industry. Now, what are the factors that influence the location of industry? First one here is raw materials or the availability of raw materials. For example, as I already told, there are two types of raw materials in this concept, that are weight loss industries and another one is weight gain industries. First one, weight loss industries says reduces waste or impure material, and the final product transportation cost is lower because the raw material loses its weight after becoming the finished product. In this case, the transportation cost will be cheaper. In case of the second raw material, that is weight gain industries, the final stage of production nearest to the market, and hence transportation cost is higher compared to the latter. The second factor that influences the location is the availability of labor and also the labor price, the skill of the labor and the amount or the quantity of the labor. We need to take care of the labor where they are available for lower price, where the skill of the labor is convenient to the production of that particular commodity. All these kinds of technique, all these kinds of feature and nature of the labor has to be taken into account while deciding the location of the industry. We cannot establish an IT industry or software industry in a village area or a rural background, because there will be very hard to find skilled labor and very knowledgeable laborers. Of course, we can find cheap laborers for the production, but the skill or the knowledge that is required for the production of that particular software or information technology will not be available with the backward labor type. That's why the location of industry has to be taken into account on the nature and the job of the laborer and the particular commodity to be produced. The next important factor that needs to be taken into account is the market area, like the size of the market for the product that is being produced by the industry, and the nature and distribution of the market also is very important, and the distance of the market area from the location of industries is also very much important while deciding the place for the establishment of an industry. Whenever you produce a commodity, you will be deciding for, or you will be wanting to have a less transportation cost. Therefore, you will be deciding to establish your industry nearest to the marketplace for the commodity that you are producing. Then here is a pictorial example of two types of raw materials and the transportation cost of the raw material. Like here, for example, let me show you by drawing it or highlighting it. Here the raw material is available and the second raw material is available here, and the factory is located here, and the availability of raw material is very much near to the factory, and this raw material is of weight losing type of raw material. Like for example, the raw material is heavier than the finished products. The raw material loses its weight or loses its impurities after production. Therefore, the transportation cost of this lighter finished product towards the market will be cheaper compared to the factory located near the markets, because the heavy raw materials need to be taken to the factory if the factory was located near the market area. So this is an example of weight losing type of raw material. The second one is weight gaining raw material. So two types of raw materials will be transported towards the industrial area, and here in the factory the raw materials are turned into finished products, and this finished product is usually heavier than the raw materials, and that is why the factory needs to be located very much near the market area, so that transportation cost is very much less compared to transporting cheaper or lighter raw material. So this technique is useful for weight gaining type of products, like for example soda and production of glass. So raw material is very much lighter and the finished product is very much delicate and heavier than the raw material. That's why factories needs to be located near the market area so that it can reduce the transportation cost. In the previous example, weight losing material or weight losing raw material, for example, that is paper and production of steel, because for the production of paper we need heavy wood and trees, and they are usually heavier than the finished products, like maybe notebooks or papers are very much lighter than the raw material. And as well as the production of steel, because steel needs to be extracted from the steel ore, that is very much heavier, that is the quantity of raw material will be very much higher than the production of steel. That's why the factory is located near the availability of its heavy raw materials. I hope you have understood this, and let's go to the last factor that influences the location of industry, which is transportation. The cost reflects the freight rates or the production rates, that is the terminal cost, which means associated with loading, unloading and packaging. The second type of cost is line haul cost. It varies with individual shipments, distance and equipment used. And also break off bulk points, like for example sites where goods must be transferred or transshipped in case the goods is transferred or transported from ship, and also change in the mode of transportation. The next one is results in additional terminal cost, and also creates orientation near business to business point. So all these points need to be taken into account while establishing an industry in a certain area. The factors that are mainly influencing the location of industry are, let us revise that, they are transportation, raw materials, availability of labor with particular set of skills and particular price level, as well as the quantity of labor required for the production of that commodity, and also the location of the market. So I hope you have understood till this, and in the next class we will be studied about the Vebler's theory of the industrial location. So that's all for today's class. Thank you.